latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Jan Proft here, and just one postscript on our discussion of the auto pen matter and Biden's mental state, right? Not fit to stand trial, but fit to make important decisions about public safety and the rule of law, and that's what decisions about commuting sentences and pardoning people for crimes, either crimes committed or crimes that may someday be committed. Those are important decisions. And mentioned his personal doctor, O'Connor, clamming up and claiming the fifth. But we have other former denizens of Biden world, like former Jill Biden press secretary Mike LaRosa, saying things publicly like this.
Can Ashley Williams or any of these witnesses credibly deny that they did not see Joe Biden's mental decline?
If they saw, I don't see how that's possible, given how close proximity and access they had. They had access to the residence. They had special badges. They were in charge of manifests and determined who was around Biden and when and how often and how frequent and for how long. They really were gatekeepers in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, because they were much more, they crossed that Rubicon from staff to family, which clouded a lot of their judgment as advisors. So when you have that close relationship to principals, you are in the bubble in a way that others aren't and observe more than anybody.
Yeah. And maybe they don't want to cross that Rubicon into becoming perjurers when whistle before committees to testify what they knew and or saw, and potentially how that relates to the auto pen matter when we get to specifics about who was actually operating it, and all of the who, what, where, and when questions are answered, if we can get answers to this, like everything else. Then you start to put together the picture, and you can make some more based claims about whether or not those pardons and commutations should hold up under scrutiny, and frankly, whether or not crimes were committed, if anything was done in the president's name without the president's knowledge. So there's the with the president's knowledge, there's did he have the capacity, and then there's the who, what, and where, and when on all of this. Speaking of cognitive decline, the nature of the debate over rescissions, $9 billion in clawing back cash that was allocated to things like NPR and PBS, as well as foreign aid, which is the bulk of it. This has to get done by Friday, and the Senate is moving in that direction, despite some big spending Republicans who don't want to, like McConnell and Collins and Murkowski, the usual suspects. The debate from the left goes something like this from the cognitively challenged Jasmine Crockett, explaining why we can't cut $1 billion from NPR and PBS, because we need important programming like Sesame Street to be delivered to Baghdad.
When you start to talk about whether or not Sesame Street or anything else that's on NPR or PBS ends up in other places, this is so that there is not this warped thought process about the Western world or about the United States. We're talking about making sure that we don't end up allowing people to be radicalized against us because they have a terrible vision of us, because they may be in a government that actually puts out bad, terrible propaganda about us.
There's nothing like sharing a love of snuffleupagus to prevent radical Islamist terrorism. That's what I always say. For more on this, please be joined by former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, now President and CEO of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Yeah, talking about not wanting people to be radicalized against us. I guess she's, Dan, all for our reforms to take on the U.S. college and university system, because that's probably the worst place these days where they radicalize young minds against us.
Yeah, we should probably be worrying more about NYU than we should about Baghdad, it would seem, right? Exactly. Just first on the auto pen piece of it, just since you were an executive, did I mean, this is not novel in itself, using the auto pen, and politician using an auto pen has to sign a lot of documents. But so it's all these contextual factors with Biden that make it a different story. But I mean, did you use an auto pen as governor on certain things?
No, the interesting thing, not on anything official. I can see an auto pen. You see it in not only the president's office, but senators, congressmen,
form letters,
sign,
and
maybe
stuff.
letters.
Yeah, right.
Constituent letters, things like that. Get well, happy birthday. But I got to tell you, I even have a line item veto when I was governor, and I signed every one of those when we go through our state budget, for example. I remember our legal staff would come in and we'd have a whole morning set up where you'd go through item by item, and they'd have them all queued up in each page of the budget that you'd go through and sign it. Even when I had my own party in charge of the state legislature, you still do line item vetoes to draw spending down and things like that. Well, you sign every one of those, and you want to know exactly what you're signing, because you're not going to put your name on something that you're not able to be held accountable for. And so it's just shocking to me. This wasn't some paper. This wasn't some general form. This wasn't a commendation for serving on some panel. You were commuting someone's sentence. These are issuing pardons. These were things that are. I didn't do pardons, for example. I don't think you should do pardons, but that's a whole different debate. But if you're going to do that, you damn well better know exactly who it is and what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of accountability, that was your calling card as governor. This matter of this, rolling matter of profligate spending in D.C. and just how painstaking it is. And I was talking to somebody about this, $9 billion in rescissions. I mean, I'm all for it, of course, but the reaction you get from the left, the Chicken Little routine, the arguments along the lines that Jasmine Crockett makes, you're going to get them whether you try to cut 1 penny from the federal budget or $1 trillion. So you might as well go big. And I don't understand why Republicans don't understand that.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's the same handful that whine all the time. And the key is you go big and go bold, do it early so that you've got time. It's obviously, this, having watched from over the state line, it's why the things we did were so important, because we did it literally within the first month and a half I was governor. And it gave us time. By the time they tried to recall me a year later, people could see the results. They could see that things that didn't fall apart. In fact, they actually got better, whether it was in the state government, the local school districts, local governments. But I think the problem is, you talk about the swamp. Well, it's this massive bureaucracy we see in Washington. To a lesser extent, you see it in Springfield and Madison and other state houses. But oftentimes, as I wrote about, the people who screw things up are then the ones who come back with these so-called reform plans, but really are about just spending even more money to try and fix things. Whether it's Medicaid fraud, whether it's problems with the food stamp program. Probably the worst out there in the federal government these days has got the least sexy, but it's all the money spent on trying to reform IT and the computer system. I think last year the Government Accountability Office said it was over $100 billion just wasted on federal IT projects. And so the idea that we don't hold anyone accountable for that, because you've got all these civil service processes, in some cases, particularly like the post office and the state and local level collective bargaining union contracts, we should have merit-based contracting. We should have merit-based outcomes. We did that in Wisconsin. The left went crazy, but it actually made the government work better.
It's a really good point you make, too, about going big and going early. And the Trump administration, I wouldn't necessarily say the BBB is that, given the Meatball Sunday it turned into, but on some other matters, and this has the additional benefit of running counter to the hysterical authoritarian arguments the left makes. Some other matters, he did go big early with respect to trying to reduce the federal workforce, both with early buyouts as well as with reductions in force. And now, because he went big early, it's some of these decisions he knew would be litigated have wound their way through the courts, and the courts are upholding things like cutting the size of the Department of Education in half. And then it clears the way for Congress to move, Republicans in Congress to move to revoke the federal charter for the Department of Education altogether, and maybe accomplish something that Republicans have been talking about ever since Carter created that agency. So, I mean, that's sort of what you need to look back on in part, it seems to me, over the last 7 months and say, this is how you do it if you really want structural reform of government.
Totally agree. And that's where I think the DOGE, and now with the big, beautiful bill, the president signed the law on July 4th. I think it was something like 28 of the executive orders that he signed were codified now in federal statute and that legislation. So huge changes, but now they need to follow through with the rescissions. Of course, because of reconciliation, there's only certain things you can put in that big, beautiful bill. Now they need to follow up and do the rest of the reforms, and thank God we've got a court. And there, I would point out, to me, it's important to say it's not a conservative in the political sense, but a court that actually believes what our founders intended, that there should be a separation of powers, and that they should be focused on what's constitutional, not whatever on their mind that day. And so they've upheld the executive branch's right to make changes. Now, they can't get rid of the Department of Education entirely on their own. They have to work with Congress to do that, but pull those things back. I've always said we shouldn't just be talking about ending it or dissolving it. We should be talking about restoring the rights of parents and of local school board members to run their schools and educate their children, and get that out of the hands of the federal bureaucrats in Washington. The last month or so, I've been having this debate with Tammy Baldwin, the U.S. Senator from Wisconsin, who's, this is going to be awful for Wisconsin. It's going to be awful for all these other states. No, what she's saying is she thinks federal bureaucrats know better than parents and school board members in our states, and that's just not the fact. That's just not right, and that's what we have to keep pushing back on. It's much better at the local level, not only in terms of education, it's much better in terms of spending, because you can actually hold people accountable.
I wanted to get your take on something that pertains to your current job at Young America's Foundation, in terms of whether or not you see progress within the academy. A nice story out of the Big Ten, Michigan State University to be specific. A nematologist. Do you know what a nematologist is, Governor?
I do not.
Yeah. It's a person who studies nematodes, which like roundworms. Do you know this?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? I'm a font of useless information. Anyway, her name is Marisol Quintanilla, and she was targeted for elimination on the campus in Lansing there because she spoke out against DEI policies on campus. She, believed in merit, novel concept. Well,
what a shock.
Yeah, right. She has now, because a civil rights group intervened on her behalf after she failed to obtain tenure, targeted politically, despite 2 decades of experience, 21 peer-reviewed publications, $6.2 million in grants, 198 extension talks. I mean, on and on in terms of the merit that the meritorious case she can make for tenure. Well, now she's got tenure because the Michigan State essentially conceded without conceding explicitly that, yes, she should have been granted tenure, and yes, it was political, and now we're granting her tenure. Just a case like that. This is somebody so far removed from politics, right? I mean, this is a scientist.
Just doing the thing that they set up to do in the first place.
Right.
Things.
And so, I mean, despite what sort of we started this talking about what's going on in college campuses with some of the grotesque protests, violence, anti-Semitism. But on the other side, quietly, you're seeing more and more of these stories pop up where there seems to be the pendulum swinging a little bit back towards sanity on campus. And I wanted to get your take since you're closer to it.
Well, it's a split case here. You get instances like this. The argument overall, I've actually said even more than students are educators, either conservative or in some cases it appears as in this instance, just objective, just ones who are not political, not trying to be one way or the other, just trying to be common sense. And I would even apply that to what she appeared to say about DI. Like, hey, maybe we should just be a meritocracy. Maybe the best way to celebrate diversity is encourage the best people to do things and to reward them for doing that, and have a free and equal society. That's not a conservative idea. That's an American idea. That's we're all created equal. That's what we just celebrated July 4th. So, yeah, there's good news when you have cases like that. We see some good news. Last fall, we certainly saw it in terms of the shift of younger voters in the fall elections. I worry about whether that's sustainable. We also just saw a Gallup poll a week ago that showed that pride in America is down to the lowest level ever, and it's driven by two categories: Democrats, huge drop off from a year ago, and younger voters,
Gen Z,
are buying into that. And so I think between now and next year, it's one of the reasons why Young America's Foundation, YAF.org, if people are interested, is doing a whole Freedom at 250 to point out that these freedoms we just can't take for granted. Our founders literally risked their lives for the freedoms we enjoy today. The least we could do is pay attention to how we got them and why it's important to keep them. And so we're going to be on that. We're going to push that. There's hope considering what we saw last fall, but there's also plenty of challenges when you see these Gallup numbers.
Are you still, all the YAF speakers, Young America's Foundation speakers that you guys help bring to campuses around the country, is it still sort of the same climate in terms of the efforts to cancel their speeches or protests that turn into just
a doubt.
Shouting them down?
Yeah,
and so
over
forth.
and over again, where it's Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh. In fact, we even have Dr. Ben Carson, for example, is going to be over in Dixon at the Reagan Boyd Home next Friday at one of our high school conferences. By the way, people have high schoolers and middle schoolers, YF.org, particularly middle schoolers. We'd love to have even more in there. But on the college campuses, when Dr. Carson comes or some of the other names I just mentioned come, it always amazes me, even in places where we've litigated, it's like they forget or they don't pay attention, or probably they just don't care in many cases. But we always say if you're under attack, YAF's got your back. We will litigate over and over again because every student has a right. They deserve to be able to hear more than one point of view on campus. And the more we get those voices out there, the more chances we are to have the level of playing field.
He is Scott Walker, former governor of the state of Wisconsin, of course, president and CEO of Young America's Foundation, now YAF.org, YAF.org. Governor Walker, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good one.
You too. And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Did you know that AM 560 radio has a full